What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Fire Medic Adventure 17. It's Matt. You know me as that firefighter medic guy. Yes, I am that guy. And I'm that guy today coming here to lend a helping hand. There was a really bad thing that happened here in the Central Florida area. One of the very popular YouTubers, Adam the Woo, passed away unexpectedly. Looked to be in his sleep. And his friends found him, I believe, at some point on December 22nd after repeated attempts with trying to get the police department's help and everything else. I'm going to do a video in the near future about that whole situation. Mike, who goes by the name of German in Venice on YouTube, was one of the first ones to get to Adam's house because they were supposed to do something together that day on the 22nd. And after Adam didn't answer the door, after repeated knocks, he started getting very concerned. And long story short, he ended up calling a wellness check with the Osceola County Police Department. And they showed up and basically said, there's nothing we can do. And after a lot of begging and pleading, please, I know my friend's got to be in trouble. Like, this is not normal behavior for him. And they basically just said, nope, can't do anything, and they left the scene. And long story short, they grabbed a couple of his other friends that lived in the town of Celebration, grabbed a ladder that was across the street, and one of his friends went up there and saw him laying in bed, not moving, and then they called 911 again. Same officers showed back up and basically wanted to arrest Adam's friends because they told them not to, because the officers told them not to try to get into the house. And then when they said he's upstairs not moving, obviously it's a different scenario. Like I said, we're going to talk about that not in this vlog because I got other things to talk about, and this is more of a vlog of a message of hope and healing. This other one's going to be more of a critical vlog on the Osceola County Sheriff's Department and how their behavior really, one, looked absolutely terrible, but two, would that time that passed while they were just saying, no, we can't do anything, would that have made any difference? We have no idea. But as somebody that's dedicated my life to helping the public when they're in need, you just don't walk away when you can tell when somebody's concerned. I'm sorry. But if you're in the fire rescue or police department or EMS or even work in a hospital or whatever, when people are in distress. You can see it. It's written all over their face versus when people are just faking and trying to get attention. They're wildly different. Anybody that's been in a public service line of work like that, you know what I'm talking about. You can tell when people are truly concerned, like something's wrong. And you got to pay attention to that. You can't just write that off and be like, nah, yeah, it's fine. So we'll talk about that moving forward. But today what I wanted to do is I wanted to extend a message of hope and healing to Adam's friends, all of Adam's friends, his fans, his family, and his very close friends. Now, I know many of you, probably all of you, have no idea who I am. I'm just one of those firefighter medic guys that decided to start a YouTube channel. And as I mentioned earlier in the intro, somebody that's dedicated most of my life to helping people in a time of need, this is me extending a message of hope and healing to everybody. Like I said, especially to Adam's family and his closest friends. Adam's dad uploaded a video the other day that was very touching. And one of the videos, too, that really got my attention was from, probably without a doubt, one of Adam's bestest friends. And I don't know his real name other than I know his YouTube name because I follow his videos from time to time. And he goes by the name of Justin Scard. Justin and Adam were very close. Very close. They have a very rich history together. Of all the people that Adam did videos with, Justin was one of those people that was one consistent in a lot of videos that Adam would do, especially we go out to Southern California. And, over the last couple of weeks, Justin's been sitting down with the camera talking about memories, and he's been going through the emotions for sure. And you can hear in his voice he's very confused. He's not sure why he's feeling this way. Is this normal? and a couple of other Adam's closer friends, said very similar things. There's another guy that lives locally here in the area. I believe his name on YouTube is Drew in the Moment. I guess he spent some time with Adam the day before Adam passed. And, you could just hear it again in his voice that, a lot of Adam's friends are having a very hard time with this. And, it's very normal. But Justin especially, he's really having a hard time with this. Now, Justin lives out in Southern California, but he's been here in Orlando for a while. He was walking around Celebration yesterday, filming, a lot of things that Adam used to film and just walking and talking with the camera. And some of the things that he was saying, basically what if he ever comes across this video or any of other Adam's friends come across this video or even his family, I just want to extend a message of hope and healing and let you all know that everything that you're feeling is very normal. Justin especially, he had mentioned that of all the people in his life that he's lost, Adam is the closest person to him that he's lost. And he's really not sure how to deal with this. He's really struggling. And that's why I want to do this video, in case he comes across it or one of his friends comes across it and forwards it to him. However, or like I said, any of other Adam's friends or family. It's just sometimes it's nice to hear a positive message of hope and healing from somebody that you have no idea who they are. This guy right here. And also this video, I'm not monetizing this. I don't want anything out of this video other than I just want to help people with it. That's all I want to do. If any ads show up on this, this is because YouTube is doing YouTube things. I will have this marked as not monetizable. Like I said, I don't want any money. I don't want anything from this. I just want to give everybody a message of hope and healing. And to Justin especially, because he's been, like I said, been uploading a lot of videos lately and just trying to understand this. And some of the things he said yesterday, really caught my attention. And a couple of them were that, he wasn't sure if it's time to get back up and move on and start doing funny videos again and basically start having a good time, because he said something along the line of, well, if I do that, then that means I'm moving on and I'll forget about my best friend. And you won't forget about your best friend. You won't. And I can tell you the other thing. Yes, it is important to move on, because I believe the title of that video that he uploaded yesterday, I think the title was called Getting Back Up. And while it is important to move on, it is very healthy to move on and get back up and dust yourself off and get moving again with life. You have to do it at your own pace. You can't let anybody else dictate when you should do it. Somebody that has no idea what this is like, they can all sit there and go, oh, you just got to get back up, put one foot in front of the other, and every day is going to be much better than the last. Well, yes, that is true. However, it happens at different stages for all of us. I think back to, losing some very important people in my life. All of my grandparents have passed on, and both my grandparents on my mom's side and my dad's side had very big impacts on my life, especially with sports. And, losing them was very, very difficult. I got into bowling and golf largely because both of my grandfathers, and my grandmothers, I used to love to call them on the phone. And when I'd go visit, I'd love to sit and talk with them. And just, we had this amazing, family connection. And it was just, I love visiting my grandparents on both sides of the family. And, after they had passed on, obviously it wasn't so my grandparents on my mom's side, they were very close together when they passed. On my dad's side, they were pretty far apart. But, moving forward to current time, I do miss them. But again, we all handle that in our own ways. For me, it's not at the moment when it happened, but it's usually later on, like a couple months later, when I really feel it. And then I allow myself to go through it. Other people may deal with it in the moment and it may last for a month and then they start moving forward. Some people, it might not get to them for a year. We all are in this big world together, but we all do things on our own time. It's kind of like in the movie A Christmas Carol with Scrooge, when Marley said that, the ghost of Christmas future would appear in his own good time. And that's kind of how we deal with things on our own. All of our emotions, all of our healing, everything that happens in its own good time for us. And again, some of us, it may be right away. Others, it may be months or years. And, Justin especially said, he's had moments where he feels guilty because maybe he shouldn't be moving on so soon. And like I just mentioned, he said he feels guilty because, well, what if I forget my friend? What if I don't remember him anymore? And one of my messages to him is that just because you're moving forward doesn't mean you're forgetting him. You're going to find out that in time, you're going to find your sadness that you're experiencing now because you're going through the motions. These are the stages of grief, and they're very real. And like I said, they happen at different stages for all of us. What you're feeling now is very, very normal. And only you are going to know when it's time to move on. It is very important to move on. It's very healthy to do that. But you're going to know when it's time. You're literally going to have a moment. You're going to wake up one day and you're going to be like, you know what? It's time to move forward. And then you're going to move forward. You're going to start getting back to life. And then you're going to have a few things that remind you of them. Then you're going to get knocked back a little bit. And you're going to move forward again. It's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it's going to happen like that for a little while. And then over time, what's going to happen is that instead of sad memories, you're going to go do things and you're going to think of him. And then you're going to be happy about it. And you're going to feel like he's there with you. It's like both of my grandfathers were big influences in me getting into bowling and golf. And I tell you, the first few months after my grandfather on my mom's side passed away, it was really hard to get into the bowling alley. I was struggling with it because he taught me everything I know about bowling, and he's the reason I almost ended up going professional. I was really close. In fact, that's something I may still consider one day. But those first few months, it was tough. And same with golfing. It was really hard because I missed calling him after a really good round or a really good or shooting a really good series in bowling. And then same with my other grandfather on my dad's side. He used to come out, watch me golf when I'd be in the tournaments and that. And over the years, after they were gone, they weren't there. And what ended up happening was, instead of being sad, now when I'm bowling or out on the golf course, or even when I'm like last year, and I'll be back again this year when I go to Bay Hill and some of the other PGA tournament stops, as I'm walking the golf course, I feel them there with me. It's not sad anymore. It's more of a happy feeling. Like I feel their presence when I'm on the golf course. And that's one of the reasons I like going to the theme parks, because that's what we did when I grew up. That was always our summer vacations. We go to a theme park. And so I really enjoy being there because I feel them there. I can feel it, and there's happy memories. Now, we never went to Disney World. We went to Kings Island, Cedar Point, stuff like that. But it's still, it's being in a park like that. And so, like with Justin and Adam's other close friends and even his family, there's going to hit a point where instead of being sad about something, it's going to turn to really happy thoughts and good memories. And they'll talk about, remember this time when, or, remember when this happened. But again, that takes time to get there. And again, it happens at everybody's own pace. But again, like I said, don't let anybody rush you either. Don't let anybody sit there and go, man, you need to get back up. Tomorrow, just got to get out and forget about it. You can't do that. People that talk like that have never been in those shoes before. And you just got to take that stuff with a grain of salt and just move on and be like, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'll just deal with this in my own way. But just know that every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every month that passes from that terrible day, all of those little pieces of time that pass puts you that much farther away from the event, but it puts you that much closer to healing from the event. And that's how you take it. You take it every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every month, and every year. And eventually you get enough time in between where you start feeling better. And it's okay. It's okay to, have those moments of hurt and pain and sadness. And it's also okay to have those moments of laughter and, and feeling like you're moving on. That's one thing that, I don't talk about it a whole lot, but the fire service and EMS and even working in the hospital, that's one of the hardest parts of this profession is helping other family members in a time of need, especially when something truly horrible happens. And deep down inside, there's nothing, absolutely nothing you can say that's going to make it any better. And all you can do is be there for them. I can't tell you how many times throughout the last 18 years that I've had to do that, with the really, really good calls where you save somebody's life and, there's a positive outcome. There's also the other side where despite your best efforts, we weren't successful. And I tell you, this is very hard, and you carry that with you. And it's very similar because you can't help but feel for the family, because like I just said, there's nothing you can say or do that's going to make anything any better other than just, while you're there, is just try to be there for them. And so, having had experiences like that, that's why I wanted to do this video, because I know a lot of them, especially Justin, have said, am I acting right? Is this normal? That, you have no idea, especially if it's the first time you've been through this. You have no idea because, somebody may say that, oh, you should have been over it by now. Others say, oh, you could be 2, 3, 4 years. It's very confusing. It's a very confusing time. But as I said, your own self will determine when you are ready. But also, too, let yourself heal. It's very important to let yourself heal. Don't delay it or don't hold on to it, because I've seen this also go the other way, which isn't healthy, where somebody loses somebody very important to them and, 10, 15, 20 years later, they're still acting like it just happened. That's not healthy either. You have to move forward in a positive, healthy way. And one of the best ways to do that is do exactly what you all are doing now. And that is whether it be talking to the camera and uploading a video, or talking to the camera and not even uploading it, or going somewhere and just crying it out, going somewhere screaming at the clouds. Whatever it is you got to do, you got to get it out of your system. It is like your body is trying to detoxify from this. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is they get tired of feeling this way because, society or whomever, or even their best friends or family will say, oh, it's been 2 or 3 weeks, you should be fine by now. And then they start thinking, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. So then what do? They go to see a freaking doctor or a psychologist. And then what do the doctor, psychologists do? What is their first choice? Medication. Or they don't go to a doctor or a psychologist and they just take matters into their own hands and they get into drugs or alcohol to numb the pain, because we all get to a point where we're tired of feeling it. But I will tell you all, my biggest advice from somebody that has been there and done that: stay out of the doctor's offices. Don't go looking for prescriptions to numb the pain. Don't get into any alcohol. Don't get into any drugs. And I know people will say, oh, I would never do that. But when you get into that moment and you're tired of feeling this way, it's very easy to say, well, I'll make an exception just this one time. The problem is those numb your body's natural response to a pain stressor. And when you start numbing that, yes, you feel amazing for a couple weeks. You feel like you've been reborn. You don't have any bad thoughts. You're golden. You're moving forward. But just like anything, if it's too good to be true, it usually is. And this is one of those things where it's too good to be true. Because what starts happening is the brain is very intelligent, and all of those emotions and feelings that you were numbing all get stored way back. And then eventually that medication stops working like it used to. And then when it wears off, all those emotions and feelings come back 10, 15, 20 times worse than what they would have if you were to just deal with it. That's what they call is rebound depression, rebound stress, rebound PTSD, rebound, whatever you want to call it. It's a rebound effect. And it's very widely known in, use of drugs, alcohol, or even prescription medications. You cannot numb this out. You have to face it. You got to deal with it. The sooner you let your body deal with it, the sooner you let it get out of your system, the sooner you're going to heal. It's when people try to numb it is when they start dragging these things out for months and years on end, and then they can't figure out why they don't feel better. It's because you cannot numb the natural pain response of the body. And I would say of all of my pieces of advice, that is my biggest one that I hope everybody gets that message is please don't turn to anything to try to substitute and numb the pain from this. Let your body heal. Don't let anybody tell you, well, you shouldn't be crying or you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't be anything. You're going to go through these emotions. It's part of the natural healing. And that's one of the things that we're learning now too with fire, EMS, and police. We all have that a lot of us carry post-traumatic stress. It's just you have to deal with it in a healthy way. And sadly, if you go to a doctor, the first thing they want to do is throw meds at you. Well, that doesn't help matters. That makes it worse. It makes it a lot worse. You have to let your body heal the natural way. And I'll tell you one of the other things, one of the best ways to start with the feeling better is, again, you got to do it on your own time, but sooner obviously is always better than way later. But get some exercise. Get outside. Like I said, even if you're walking and talking with a camera, get some exercise, go out for a run, get into the gym, lift a little bit of weights. Do some yoga, some stretching, whatever you got to do to get those endorphins flowing. And as they do that, you're going to find yourself pushing a lot of this emotion out. It's going to start, like I said, it's going to start happening. It'll be frequent, and then it'll be less frequent, and then it'll be a whole lot less frequent. And then like I said, you're going to notice at some point, you're going to notice a flip around where instead of feeling sad, these are going to be happy memories. And again, it just takes time, but do it healthy and make sure you eat right. One of the biggest pitfalls that kind of court this type of situation is people don't want to do anything because they're sad. So then they stay at home a lot more. Then they start eating badly, which then that creates more inflammation in the body, which creates a more intense stress response, which makes things worse. And then our activity level drops, which makes it worse. And so you have to make sure you try to keep up some level of activity. You got to get the blood moving, the endorphins running, and that'll help. That'll help. But I tell you, good eating and make sure you get some good exercise. And don't feel bad. Like I said, don't feel bad if you have that day where you want to go out and you want to do something. And don't worry, you're not going to forget about your best friend or your family member. It's just, it won't happen. It's your brain trying to heal naturally. That's the one thing that, unfortunately is part of healing is there's this big, it's like a bell curve where you got this big upswing. And then once you get to the top, you kind of stay in this, it kind of sucks for a while. But then when you get past that, then you begin the descent back down, back into feeling better. But it's a progression, and you have to let your body go through that. And because the other thing I noticed Justin was saying as well is he's talking about, how he thought he would feel after certain, as you say, milestones were met. Basically, that there was some feelings of sadness, but while they were trying to get all of this put together, after everybody found out, while they had to call everybody and, helping and with Justin helping Adam's family out, having to go to his house and, seeing all the memorials and stuff people had left him. And then also the planning leading up to the funeral, which I think it was right after New Year's. All of that happening, there was something to do. So you were focusing on something. And he said that, well, I thought that after, we had laid Adam to rest that I would start feeling better. But now he was saying I feel almost worse because now there's nothing to do. Everything's done. And he said, I know Adam's in a good place. His spirit is is happy, and he's just fine. Justin says it's us that are left behind, that we got to try to figure this whole thing out now. And what he says is true, but the reason people always seem to get that sadness after everything is done is just because of that. Everything's done. There's nothing more to do. Everything's done. So now it's like the reality of this whole situation is setting in. And a lot of like I said, the sadness, the anger, the grief, the crying and whatnot, that tends to come back because there's nothing to focus on. Everything is done. And now that's when the healing really does begin. And so, he was wondering if that was normal or not to feel how he was feeling. And my message once again is, yes, that's very normal how you're feeling. You're going through the stages of this. And one of the things that they teach us in fire rescue when you're going through the academy and even again in EMT and then paramedic school is they talk about the stages of grief, and everybody goes through them differently. There is no right or wrong way to get through it, but it happens. It happens to everybody. And as I just mentioned earlier, the important thing is to go through those stages, understand it's part of a healthy way of healing, and that no, there's nothing wrong with you. You're absolutely feeling exactly how you should feel. And because Justin was saying too that he felt a sense of comfort, being in celebration. He said he's going to be there for another week or so. And yes, walking around a familiar place where a good friend or very close family member, used to live, it is very comforting. Or it's even like, let's say somebody let's say somebody was even married and sadly that marriage ended in divorce. And, for one person, it just hit them like a ton of bricks, and they didn't want it to happen, but it happened anyway. And so they're going through the grief process of an ending marriage. And what'll happen is a lot of times that person will go back to either the neighborhood or the town or city or somewhere or close by where, the other person's family may live, just something to put them in that comfort zone. They know they're not going to see the person that left them, but there's something about being there in a familiar place that helps you heal, or it helps you feel better for a little bit. And so by Justin walking around Celebration and filming yesterday, it puts him in a very familiar place where his best friend used to walk a lot of times. And again, that's part of healing. There's nothing abnormal about doing that. It's a very normal part of healing. The one thing, though, now I will say that in current times, especially with YouTube, social media and that, is we have these cameras and we have the ability to post things. And I tell you, to some people, this can be a great way just to get everything out of your system. And whether one person hears it and listens to it or 100,000 hear it and listen to it, you've put it out there. You're taking everything that's inside here and you're moving it out of the body, which that is a very important part of healing. I know I keep talking about healing, but there's many ways that the body heals from things. And when it comes to stress and grief and sadness and that, the only way to get better is just like recovering from a virus. What happens when the body's fighting a virus and then ultimately defeats the virus? Then you recover. You get a very high temperature. You feel really bad. The temperature breaks. It usually happens while you're sleeping. You wake up absolutely covered in sweat, and then the body's on the road to recovery. And so it's very similar to, the healing process when we're going through this grieving process. It's a peak, and then it starts coming back down, but you have to let the body do it, and you have to get it out of your body. You cannot hold it in, and that's where prescription meds, drugs, and alcohol fail, because it suppresses everything. So think of it as the body purifying itself and detoxifying itself. You're getting all the badness that's within, and through the various emotions, that's the body pushing it out. It's a form of healing. And so again, don't feel bad about your emotions and everything. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of that there's something wrong with you. I know in current times they say, we shouldn't really share our emotions out and about publicly, but it's okay. Things like this, it's all right. If you feel that it's your best comfort to turn the camera on and speak with the camera and then upload it, or even if you don't upload it, it's just you're getting it out of your body. Like I said, very similar to how the body detoxifies itself from a virus. So again, everybody, I just want to, extend a message of hope from a complete stranger. I know a lot of you probably have no idea who I am. And sometimes it is better to hear a positive message of hope and healing from somebody who you have no idea who they are, and somebody that understands where you're coming from and lets you know that everything that you're feeling is very normal and it is part of the process to get better. So keep going forward every day. And don't feel bad if you want to have a day where you're like, you know what, let's go out and do something fun today. Let's go shoot a fun vlog, or let's go do something really enjoyable. And like I said, you won't forget about your best friend. I promise you won't. But it's a normal sign of healing. And for Adam's friends that don't live here in the Orlando area and they live out in Southern California, like Justin does, if you want to stay a while longer and that helps you feel better, then do so. That's the one thing about, doing YouTube as a profession is it kind of gives you that freedom to move around, and you can go someplace and stay there for a while, and then you can go a different place. And, and if right now it feels comfortable to stay near the Celebration area and walk around Celebration or walk around Disney World, do it as long as you feel the need to, and you'll know when it's time, when you need to get back home and start moving forward back at home in Southern California. Again, don't let anybody try to tell you that you're doing this wrong, because I can assure you you're not. Because you're going through this just like any healthy person would go through it. It's very normal. But when you've never been there, it all seems so very abnormal, and that's why I'm here, to tell you that you're very normal in everything that you're doing. There's nothing unusual about anything that any of you are doing right now. And one other thing, I'm just going to extend this out there. Don't have to take it, but it's available. My email address is attached to my YouTube channel. If you want to shoot me an email, just write something. If you have any questions, just want to write, whatever. If you're in the area and you're out at the Disney parks or Universal and you just need somebody to chat with, shoot me a message. If I'm not at work, I'll come join you for a little bit, sit and chit chat. And I know it might seem weird, me saying this. Well, just come and, shoot me a message and we'll, meet me at the park or wherever and you just talk my ear off. Believe me, I know that might seem odd for me to do that, but it's also part of healing. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm just saying that this is something that I completely understand where everybody is at. And sometimes it does help to just talk with somebody who is more or less a complete stranger, but yet that stranger knows exactly how you feel. And just like in the fire service, I can't tell you how many times either myself or the firefighters that I've worked with, that somebody was going through something pretty difficult and we have a conversation on the front bumper of the fire engine late at night, just one person talking and the other one listening. Sometimes the one that's listening doesn't say anything. They just need somebody to listen to what they're feeling. And like I said, that's my offer. So everybody, I hope this message helps. And I hope you all in time find some healing. And you'll get there. I promise you'll get there. But it's a step by step. It's every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every month, every year. And the farther you get away from that horrible day, the better you're going to feel. I promise you. You're going to feel a lot better in time. And it's okay to let yourself feel better. But if you're not there yet, that's okay too. But just make sure you're keeping healthy habits. That's one of my biggest tips is just keep healthy habits. Don't get into days where you're just doing nothing for days on end, Every now and then, it's okay to have a day where you just don't, I get it, man. You just don't feel like doing anything. Those days can come from time to time. It's okay to have a day like that. But what you want to avoid is stringing multiple days and weeks and even months of that. That's when things can really take a negative turn, because then it's disrupting the healing process. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, as somebody that's dedicated the majority of my life to helping people, this is my extension to you all, and a message of positivity and hope. I know where you're all coming from. I know exactly where you're coming from, and just listening to everybody's stories and how everybody's feeling, I completely understand. I just want you all to know that you're all gonna get better. I promise you. I promise you, it will happen. And so, in closing, to all of Adam's friends and family, and everybody that loved watching him around the world on YouTube, especially Adam's close friends, however you're dealing with this, please know that there's nothing wrong with you, and that everything you're feeling is very normal. And just like everything I talked about over the last, however long this has been, 30 plus, almost 40 minutes, there is hope in healing, and there are things to look forward to, in the future. And I know I keep saying this, but please know there's nothing wrong with you. Any of you that might be feeling sad, that you're all going through this as any normal person would. It's just we all deal with it differently. And don't let anybody tell you that there's something wrong with you, you're abnormal, or you should be over this by now. People that talk like that have never been through anything like this. Either that, or they have been through something like this and they're just so deep in denial, and they're holding all of this, stress and PTSD and everything else inside. They're trying to play the tough act, that deep down they know it bothers them, but they're trying to play it off as, oh, it's fine. It's just like in fire rescue, when people come up to you and say, especially when you're brand new, oh, it gets easier. Every person that you see that didn't make it, or that was injured really, really bad in a serious incident, they'll say, oh, it gets easier. No, it doesn't. It's not normal for those things to get easier. We're all human. And when people talk like that, they're usually some of the people that have the biggest issues, because they haven't let themselves heal. They just keep suppressing it through various ways and unhealthy ways. And then at some point, like anything, it's going to come out, and you can't stop it. The body's going to release things as the body wants to, and there's no stopping it. So it's much easier to let your body do it the healthy and natural way. And however that is, if it's walking and talking to a camera, if it's picking up the phone and talking to somebody, if, like I said, if you want to talk to me through email, or let's say, you just happen to be in a theme park and I'm there and you want to chit chat for a minute, or you have some friends that you want to get together and walk the theme parks and chit chat, or if you want to pick up the phone and call your family and talk with them, however you do it, there's no right or wrong way. But just please, please, please stay away from the pharmaceuticals, stay away from the drugs, stay away from the alcohol. That's my biggest message with all this, because that will only make it worse in the end. It's the road to nowhere. It'll get you feeling amazing for a short while. You'll feel like you're brand new again and ready to move on, and then when you least expect it, it'll creep up and nail you, and then it's 10 times, 20 times, 40 times worse. And now it's almost like starting all over again from the very beginning, because your body ultimately still has to heal. Take care of yourselves, everybody. I have you in my thoughts. And like I said, if you need anything, just want to chat, send me an email, whatever, don't hesitate to reach out. All right, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Fire Medic Adventure 17, out. See ya.